Hello everyone and welcome. It's a pleasure to meet you all here today. I am Leila Muslimi, PhD candidate at the Department of Mir and Muslim Relations. I want to take a moment to recognize and thank some individuals here today. I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to Dr. Elahé Omidyar, whose support of the Elahé Omidyar Institute of Iranian Studies has made this program possible. I also want to thank our mentor, Professor Malek, the inaugural director of the Elahé Omidyar Institute of Iranian Studies, for supporting the Iranian Studies student program. My sincere thanks also go to Balal for organizing such an event. Thank you, Balal. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, this land has been the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississauga of the Credit. Today, it continues to be the home of many indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We are deeply grateful for the opportunity to gather and work in this land. Now, I will pass the floor to my colleague, who is also a PhD candidate and will be moderating today's symposium. And before we begin, I want to ask Professor Kuli if you have any remarks.
Well, first of all, thanks to you and also to Iranian Studies Student Forum to organizing such a wonderful gathering. And we look forward to your intellectual leadership and planning of more wonderful events to come.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gana Kim from the Iranian Student Forum. It's my great pleasure to have an opportunity to introduce today's speaker and character. Our first speaker today is Quentin Arnoux, a PhD student in the Department of Near and Middle Eastern Civilizations at the University of Toronto. Quentin has received several prestigious awards and scholarships, including the most recent award from Elahé Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies. His research explores the production of illustrated shahnamehs and addresses the questions of authorship, particularly focusing on versions signed by or attributed to the renowned Safavid master painter Musavvir in the latter half of the 17th century. In today's presentation, titled "On Artist, a Name, a Style, What Does It Mean for a Painting to be Signed Musavvir?" Quentin will discuss methodological challenges in dealing with signatures. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Quentin with a warm round of applause.
Thank you. So good afternoon to you and maybe good evening to other people in Iran, maybe who knows, or in Europe. Yes. So, as you can see, displayed on the screen is a painting from an exquisite Shahnameh manuscript or Book of the Kings, the famous Iranian epic completed by Ferdowsi in 1010. It shows the marriage of the hero Fariborz to Farangis. This exquisite manuscript is a 2-volume Shahnameh, the first of which is currently located here in Toronto at the Aga Khan Museum. It is dated by several inscriptions mentioning the year 1065 or 1655 in our calendar. The inscriptions appear to have been made by the manuscript illustrator Musavvir, and my presentation will focus on him today. More specifically, I would like to address the methodological issues one encounters when studying this key figure of the 17th century. And indeed, while Muin's name and style are widely known to art historians of the Safavid painting studies, he remains an enigmatic figure, whose life is backed by no primary sources aside from his signatures, therefore leaving many open questions. The silence from a source standpoint contrasts with the extensive corpus associated with him, which serves as evidence of his long career, spanning roughly 60 years from the early 1630s to 1693. This body of works includes single-page paintings, drawings, illustrated manuscripts of popular works such as the Shahnameh, like the Aga Khan Museum, the Khamseh of Nizami, The Story of Yusuf and Zuleika by Jami, and less popular works such as the Histories of Shah Ismail, which is a later text. As a whole, these works tend to corroborate the existence of a prolific artist with his name, and the fact that his most excellent paintings, like the painting of the Aga Khan Museum manuscript, are signed, links his signature, so his name, with a distinctive style. But looking at the corpus, one realizes that it isn't always as straightforward. Sometimes his signatures is seen on paintings of varying quality, either from a color or composition standpoint. In other instances, paintings aren't signed, although their visual quality would encourage one to see the hand of the painter, and these paintings were therefore attributed to him. And other examples consist of paintings said to be done by followers, without any of these claims being supported by documentation or further As a result, we are left with a heterogeneous corpus, and one might wonder what it exactly means for a painting to be signed Mouin Musavvir, and what it reveals, if anything, about authorship. The elements I will discuss today with you stem from an internship I had the chance to take at the Aga Khan Museum a few months ago, under the guidance of Dr. Michael Chagnon, maybe he's here today with us, where a significant collection of paintings linked to Mouin Musavvir, both signed and attributed, is located. My presentation is divided into three parts. The first will address the state of knowledge about the painter. The second one focuses on how the artist utilizes his name and signatures over time. And in this part, I will try to highlight patterns that can then be used to support or challenge authorship regarding problematic paintings. And this will be discussed in the third and final parts. On the screen, you can see the portrait of the renowned Safavid court painter Reza Abbasi. And the inscription in the upper left corner, and the painting is now located in the library of the Princeton University Library, this portrait often serves as an entry point to studying Mouin Musavvir. In the inscription that is rendered in more detail on the screen, Mouin Musavvir informs us that Reza Abbasi was active under the reign of the Shahs Abbas I Safi and died in 1635, was his master, and Mouin Musavvir refers to him as Ustada. This implies that Mouin accomplished his formation with him somewhere around the late 1620s, early 1630s, although the exact chronology is unknown. And with this in mind, and considering the average age at which a young man would begin training in an atelier to become a painter, it has been suggested that Mouin was born no later than 1617. And this date is still accepted today in scholarship. The rare glimpse into the life of Mouin Musavvir provided by this inscription is in fact the only reliable information we have about his career, as his name is otherwise not recorded in Safavid sources. Think of art treatises or accounts or various registers. And unlike other students of Reza Abbasi, including his son Shafi Abbasi, who worked at least partially, or at least were partially connected to the royal Safavid Ketabkhane, we cannot determine if the same applies to Mouin Musavvir, and if it is, to what extent. And I'd be happy to discuss this more in the Q&A if we have time. Publication by scholars such as Masoumeh Farhad and Sheila Kembi over the past 30 years and others have been essential in piecing information together to create a tentative biography of Mouin Musavvir and provide insights into his career. Their methodology involved examining the documentation in Mouin's work, which often appears as inscription, like in this portrait of Reza Abbasi. In these inscriptions, oftentimes we would see days, months, years, and geographical location of a work, therefore providing some much needed context. And through these inscriptions, scholars were able to identify the likely area of activity of Mouin Musavvir, so far defined as Isfahan, the third capital of the Safavid dynasty since 1598, and suggest the profile of likely patrons, either related to the court or evolving out of it, but being wealthy enough to indulge in patronage. For instance, the portrait of Khalifa Sultan, who was an ulema or doctor of the law and grand vizier during the reign of Shah Abbas, the first Safi, and Abbas II on the left side, encourages to speculate that Mouin Musavvir had connections with such influential figures and may suggest the circles he navigated. Similarly, on the right, the portrait of Mirza Muhammad Taqi Tabrizi, whose identity is not clearly defined yet, but may be identified as a wealthy merchant from Tabriz, according to his Nisba, Tabrizi, also emphasize a group of affluent individuals that may have supported Mouin Musavvir. But whether these people were related to the court or evolving outside of it, this has to be further demonstrated. Building on this methodology for analyzing inscriptions, I would now like to explore signatures, both in terms of content and as a practice, as they provide significant insight into Mouin's work. By examining the evolution of Mouin Musavvir's signature over time, I intend to highlight patterns and reveal what this suggests about his identity as an artist. And in contrast to Western tradition, signing a work is not that common or obvious practice for a Persian painter. The brevity of my presentation today doesn't allow me to expand further on this topic, and this field still awaits further study. However, I can tell that it seems that the shift in practices leading Persian painters to sign their works, beginning in the second half of the 16th century, but truly developing in the 17th century with artists like Reza Abbasi or Mouin Musavvir, may be due to a change in patronage and the perception of the artist. In these two images, so on the screen, we can see one single page painting dated and signed by Mouin 1638, and the other is a colophon from a 1637 Yusuf and Zulaykha manuscript that attributes the authorship of the paintings to Mouin Musavvir. We can see that the name Mouina appears on the painting on the left, and Ara Mouina Yenakash in the colophon on the right. So it seems that at this early stage of his career, shortly after the death of his master Reza Abbasi in 1635, Mouin signed using his first name and was known by that name by the manuscript copyist who included it in the colophon. And interestingly, the term Naqash is given instead of the term Musavvir, which indicates that his nomenclature was somehow in flux. However, from the 1640s, Musavvir exclusively appears in signatures, and his name is rendered in a specific way, following a formula that wasn't used before. This formula is particularly visible in manuscript paintings and reads Raqamazad Kamina Mouin Musavvir. And on the screen, you can see examples taken from different Shahnames along with their dates and where they're located. And in these inscriptions, we note the consistency in the wording, the placement and shape, as the inscriptions are regularly located under the images in the center, and almost as if their placement was intended to ensure they would be seen. In terms of shape, they're written in two lines with black ink and seem to have been written hastily. We're far from a delicate hand, and at times reading these inscriptions requires a bit of effort, let's say. The hook in the final letter Nun in his name Mouin appears to be a recurring feature as well. Words can be added to this formula, such as Bi Nusrat or Bi Tawfiq Sana, but overall the pattern remains the same with Raqam Zad Kamina Mouin Musavvir. The uniformity of signatures below each painting suggests that the same painter, Mouin, was involved and exercised considerable control over his creations, indicating his authorship for each of them. Building on a concept first elaborated by scholar David Roxburgh, Moya Carey, the curator of Islamic collection at Chester Beatty Library in Dublin, has proposed that Mouin's habit of signing may reveal work patterns and have financial implications, as he might perhaps have received payment from a patron as per unit basis, so for each painting he completed. In this way, the signature would function as evidence of a work in progress process. This argument is compelling, and it could also apply to paintings that are not signed. And now let me allow me to clarify my points. These two paintings you see on the screen are part of the Isfandiar cycle in the Shahnameh. They depict Isfandiar in the midst of 2 of his 7 trials, one time killing wolves, another time killing lions. In terms of style, I won't get much into it, but the 2 paintings are consistent, but only the second one, where Isfandiar kills the lions, is signed with the formula that I have mentioned before. And by looking closely, we can see that these images occupy the recto and the verso of the same folio, and would therefore be done one after the other by the artist. What I could suggest then is that in addition to signing each painting as separate projects, Mouin could also consider another approach by working on paintings that belong to the same narrative cycle and only signing the last one as proof of completion. In this case, authorship would also pertain to the unsigned images. Alternatively, I could also advance that Mouin only claimed authorship using his signature for famous episodes. In the context of the Shahnameh manuscript, this argument may be supported by the fact that sequential images illustrating episodes pertaining to the Rostam cycle, the hero par excellence in the Shahnameh, or for instance, all signed, and these are examples taken from one same manuscript. All the images are signed. This argument seems to be valid so far when considering paintings that are either all signed with the formula or unsigned but part of a group of other signed paintings within the same narrative cycles. But now, how should we assess Mouin's participation in paintings that are either signed with a dubious formula, either in terms of wording or shape, or images that are co-signed? Considering Mouin's awareness of his name and his habit of signing each painting, we may be tempted to think that different signatures, such as the one you see on the right side of the screen, aren't made by him. But if that is the case, the identity behind the individuals who did these fake signatures, or whatever you want to call them, has yet to be found. Could, for instance, the name Mouin Musavvir may have been added for market purposes to increase the price of the paintings in a later stage? Or was it done by other artists in Mouin's time trying to emulate him or indicate some kind of connection with the painter? In both cases, this would suggest that Mouin and his style were known and appreciated enough maybe to be copied. I will conclude my presentation with this example. What should we do with co-signed images? For this, my reflection focuses on curious Shahnameh currently held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, known as the Cochrane 4. This manuscript challenges the methodological framework I presented to you, and it is an interesting case study, although not much is known about the context of production. The text of this manuscript was copied between 1663 and 69, according to dates in the manuscript, but the paintings were made about 25 later and signed by 5 painters, one of them being Mouin Musavvir, and he signed 21 out of 42 paintings. However, the color palette used is much lighter and duller than in other paintings. Additionally, out of these 21 paintings, 18 are co-signed by another artist named Fazl Allah. You can see a detail of his signature on the left side, who employs the same formula, Rakam Zad Kamina Fazl Allah. Sometimes even signing twice per page. A scholar named Basil Robinson suggested that Fazl Allah was Mouin Musavvir's pupil and finished the painting of his masters, who may have died in the meantime, as the date for Mouin's death is given as 1693. This claim is highly hypothetical, as no evidence has been presented to support it, and at this stage we don't know if Mouin had students and by extension a potential atelier. However, given the compositional similarities of these paintings to those in other manuscripts, and you have here an example of the same scene depicted in 2 different manuscripts, and so the consistency in terms of composition, could we imagine a concept of partial authorship, where Mouin completed the underdrawings while the color were added by another artist, in this case, Fazl Allah? Whatever was his relationship to the master, this has yet to be defined. This hypothesis challenges the notion of a single name being responsible for the entirety of the painting, but it would maybe explain the presence of multiple signatures on the same folios. Now let me conclude. Studying Mouin Musavvir raises fundamental methodological questions about the status of artists in the 17th century. There is a lot more to unpack in studying him, but for now, a few important points can be articulated. The repeated formula he employs to sign indicates a strong awareness of his identity as a painter. This is manifested almost like a stamp to signal his authorship. But whether this stamp pertains to style, compositions, or a working process has yet to be further explained, although one wouldn't necessarily exclude the other. And the fact that other signatures bearing his name don't appear to be in his hand also prompts us to reflect what the reception of his work may have been. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Quentin, for presenting your critical and very concrete research. There will be a Q&A session after other 4 presentations today. But is there anyone who really wants to quickly ask any questions? Okay, if not,
just very quickly.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have on other instances of co-production, co-painting, co-authorship? One could refer to it as a sort of co-authorship, that he may do the general design and someone else.
So far, the Cochrane manuscript at the Met is the only example I have found.
Because it makes a lot of sense that, the master just does the outline and someone
else. It was a team process, right?
Yeah.
But this is a pretty compelling example.
Okay. Thank you. Please give a round of applause and we'll move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Fahimeh Ghorbani, PhD candidate in the Department of Art History at the University of Toronto. She broadly explores Islamic art and architecture, and her current research focuses on the Persian age. She has held several fellowships around the world. To name a few, she has been a fellow at Malek National Museum and Library in Iran, the Minneapolis Institute of Art in the United States, and the Institute of Islamic Studies at the University of Sharon. She is also currently a fellow at Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies at the University of Sharon. Her today's presentation, Creating Identity, the Intellectual, Ritual, and Social Dimensions of Futuwwa in Iranian Artisanal Practices, is based on her dissertation project that studies the material culture and architecture of the Persian world from early Islamic to early modern period through the theme of Futuwwa, which encompasses the ethical qualities of bravery, generosity, loyalty, and honesty. Please join me in welcoming Fahimeh with a warm round of applause.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Dr. Tawakkoli and the Elahé Omidyar Institute for Iranian Studies for this fabulous opportunity. My today's presentation title is Crafting Identity, the Intellectual, Ritual, and Social Dimensions of Futuwwa or Javanmardi in Iranian Artisanal Practices, with a focus on Futuwwadnameh Chizsazan or hand block printers treatise. Before starting the presentation, I need to mention that Futuwwa and Javanmardi is the Persian equivalent of Futuwwa, but in this presentation, I will focus on the word and term Futuwwa because I'm focusing on a text which is its title, its formal title is Futuwwadnameh Chizsazan, and for this reason, I just adhere to the term Futuwwa instead of Javanmardi, but these two concepts are nearly parallel in the scholarship. And another quick point before starting is that all the images here, though related to the material I'm presenting, are not directly representing the material I'm talking about, because this part of the study, which presents a synopsis of one of the chapters of my thesis, is mainly contextual study and analysis, and so the pictures and the images of the block printed textiles here are just for making it less boring, more entertaining. they are related though to the subject of the Futuwwa that I'm talking about, Futuwwa cheat sazan or block printers. This is the this study examines the ways through which the assimilation and adaptation of Futuwwa, both as an ethical system and mystical tradition, endowed artisans with a profound sense of individual and communal identity. It argues that the integration of Futuwwa tradition with craft culture defined the position of artisans within the cosmic order as envisioned in medieval and early modern philosophical religious worldviews. The study argues that Futuwwa tradition functioned as a comprehensive framework that legitimized artisans' existence within a divinely structured universe, shaping their sense of self, purpose, and collective belonging. Hence, this synthesis of craft tradition and Futuwwa provided artisans with a structured framework through which they could comprehend their role in both the material and metaphysical realms, positioning them as intermediaries between the divine and the earthly, between God, archangels, prophets, philosophers, poets on one hand, and the broader society on the other hand. The study proposed that rather than perceiving their work as a mere corporal practice, artisans understood their vocation as an act of both creation and devotion, affirming their place within the intricate hierarchy of the divine, the cosmic, and the social. This way, Futuwwa did more than shaping professional identity. It confirmed existential meaning, offering a coherent and spiritually imbued vision of craftsmanship that bound artisans to a broader moral and metaphysical order. Central to the craft Futuwwa tradition were the texts craft Futuwwa. The study argues that what these texts offer were neither abstract theoretical frameworks devised by intellectual elites detached from artisan life, nor merely doctrinal prescriptions confined to a scholarly discourse. Instead, these texts were deeply embedded within the lived realities of craft workshops, regularly recited, memorized, and when possible, read by artisans themselves every day within the craft workshops based on what the text of most of these craft Futuwwa affirm. Far from being static repositories of knowledge, these texts actively structured the artisanal experience, infusing craftsmanship with an intellectual and spiritual echoes that shaped both the practical execution of craft and the self-conception of the craftsman. To explore the operative dimensions of this tradition, this study and presentation examines one such text, the Futuwwa cheat sazan, which means the block printers Futuwwa treatise. This text is not just a random text among all the Futuwwa, but is, in my view, a really good or one of the best representative of the broader genre of craft Futuwwa. I aim to engage critically with the content, structure, and thematic dimensions of this text, imposing an analytical framework that, in spite of the fluid and often non-linear structure of these texts, offer a clear and deep understanding of their function and significance. This approach moves beyond a mere introduction to this Futuwwa and this content, instead positioning it as an active agent in the construction of artisanal echoes, illuminating the ways in which its teachings permeated everyday workshop life of the artisans and infused craftsmanship with an enduring spiritual and intellectual significance. Futuwwa is an Iranian ethical system and a spiritual tradition in its simplest definition. Linguistically, Futuwwa derives from the Arabic root fata, signifying usefulness. It is linked to the term fata, meaning young man, while its plural form, fetyan, denotes a group of youth males. As an ethical framework, Futuwwa embodies numerous virtues and moral and ethical values, including altruism, wisdom, magnanimity, loyalty, honesty, and generosity. These virtues not only provide codes of individual conduct, but also established collective behavioral standards within craft communities, or within any communities that adopted the values and principles of Futuwwa. The ethical system of Futuwwa served as the ideological foundation for socio-cultural phenomena expressed in various fraternal and hierarchical organizations across the Islamic lands, especially within Iranian world. These organizations incorporated Futuwwa's spiritual essence, ethical framework of conduct, and intricate rituals, which regulated both initiation and progression of the members of the association within their hierarchies, within the hierarchy of their organizations. In Iran, as early as the 10th century BC, craft organizations and artisanal communities embraced the principles and values of Futuwwa. By integrating Futuwwa into their culture, these communities not only cultivated a distinct ethical communal identity, but also institutionalized a framework of moral rectitude, mutual solidarity, and vocational discipline. This assimilation led to the codification of elaborate moral guidelines that governed not only the conduct of individual artisans within craft guilds, but also the collective integrity of the guild and their interaction with broader society. Just a quick point that guilds have not formed during the 10th century. They were formed much later in the history, but by guild here, I mean craft associations. Furthermore, the adaptation of Futuwwa introduced a structured hierarchy within these artisanal networks and communities, delineating clear rites of passage that marked the initiation, progression, and ultimate mastery of craftsmen within their respective trades. These rites and rituals were imbued with symbolic rituals, oaths of fidelity, for example, and the transmission of esoteric knowledge, reinforcing both the spiritual and technical dimension of craftsmanship. As a result, craft guilds evolved beyond mere economic entities, transforming into quasi-religious fraternities where skill, virtue, and camaraderie were inextricably intertwined. The treatises authored by craft Futuwwa practitioners are known as craft Futuwwa or letters of Futuwwa, emerging as a distinct genre of occupational literature during the Timurid and early Safavid period between 14th to 16th centuries. These texts systematically encapsulated the intellectual, ethical, and ritual tenets of Futuwwa, adopting them into practical frameworks for artisans to practice inside the workshops. This study proposed that craft Futuwwa also play a mediary role, bridging the gap between abstract theoretical concepts and complicated philosophical ideas, and on one hand, and tangible realities of craft making on the other hand. By distilling complex philosophical ideas into practical, comprehensible guidelines, these texts made the complicated intellectual notions and concepts accessible to artisans, many of whom had limited formal education. In other words, this study argues that the Futuwwa namas did more than codifying professional practices. They served as bridge between the intellectual traditions of Islamic world and the practical realities of artisanship. Among the extant fotowadnamas, this study centers on the fotowadname Chitsazan, as I mentioned. The term cheat refers to plain cotton textile, while Chitsazan denote craftsmen who embellish these textiles with intricate designs using wooden stamps. The text is attributed to Ustad Muhammad Mashhadi, a master chitsaz based in Mashhad, a city in Khorasan region of Iran. The treatise does not specify its date of composition. However, it provides some textual clues that denote that the manuscript is tentatively situated within the late Timurid period. The text is structured into 4 primary chapters. Let's go to the next. While the interconnected nature of all parts of the text is a key characteristic of the text, for the purpose of the analytical clarity, this study analyzed its examination into 3 parts: intellectual, ethical, and ritual aspects. Intellectual aspects encompass profound theological concepts and philosophical ideas that shape artisanals' identity and practice within the craft community. The ethical dimension: craftsmanship is regulated by moral principles that govern behaviors among practitioners, ensuring an alignment with communal and moral values. And ritual practices permeated the work process, framing craftsmanship as a sacred act, evolving it to a form of worship intertwined with daily tasks. The foundational intellectual notion of craft Futuwwa tradition are its affiliation with Shi'i theology, the notion of the sacred origin of craft and the sacred hierarchy in the transmission of the knowledge of craft, and the sacredness of the tools and materials used by craftsmen. All these concepts are deeply rooted in Iranian Islamic philosophy, mysticism, and mythology. One of the intellectual cores of Futuwwa Chitsazan is a symbolic use of inclination to Shiite theology. It is evident from its symbolic use of the number 12, for example, a number deeply revered in Shi'i Islam, signifying the guild's alignment with Shi'i theology framework. The number 12 recurs throughout the text. For example, the text emphasizes the inclusion of 12 ethical principles an apprentice block printer must master to become a master craftsman. Additionally, it explicitly names 12 grandmaster block printers in the history of the profession. One can also find numerous quotations from Imam Ali within this text. These are all evidences that denote a strong Shi'i inclination within the craft communities. The notion of sacred origin and sacred chain of knowledge transmission within the craft tradition is another core content of these fotowadnamas. And also the sacredness of tools and materials, as I mentioned. In the fotowadnama, in this text, the tools and materials are not lifeless objects. They are a livelihood and they are alive material, and they are in constant dialogue with each other and also with the craftsmen and with the tools and materials with craftsmen and all with each other. So tools and materials are conduct for a spiritual engagement, and they deliberately imbued with theological and mystical significance drawn from Islamic mysticism. I'm going to wrap up. The most important, as I mentioned, the text mentions 12 important ethical requisite for a craftsman to be a master craftsman. I don't mention them here for the sake of time. And then the most important and significant ritual aspect of the treatise is its accompanying every stage of the work with zikr, and zikr is usually the Quranic verses. From the first step to the last step of the work, each step should be accompanied by a specific zikr. And and to conclude, as the textual analysis of the Futuwwa Chitsazan suggests, the profound integration of Futuwwa into Iranian artisanal tradition represents more than a historical phenomenon. It embodies a complex social-cultural system where craftsmanship, ethical conduct, and spiritual enlightenment coalesce into a unified tradition. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fahimeh, for your presentation that reaches our understanding of Futuwwa. There will be a Q&A session that we can spare to learn more about the topic. Please give a round of applause to Fahimeh, and we will meet our next speaker. Our third speaker, Sharon Mizbani, is a PhD candidate in the History of Art department at Yale University. She specializes in the comparative architectural history of the late Ottoman Empire and Qajar Iran. Her current dissertation project focuses on the development of urban water infrastructure in the 19th and 20th century, exploring the intersections of fountains and broader aesthetic, social, and environmental questions. Part of her dissertation has already been published in the Journal of the Ottoman and Turkish Studies Association, entitled The Art of Infrastructure, Hamidiye Foundations and Fountains in Late Ottoman Istanbul. Today, she'll give a presentation on her another project about Persian Baha'i artist Ali Kuli Khan under the title Curating Persian Art in North America, Ali Kuli Khan and Aesthetic Universalism. Please join me in welcoming Sharon.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Toronto.
Yes, it's such a pleasure and an honor to be back here. My professors that planted the seed of my intellectual growth. It's such an honor to present here right now. So as it was mentioned, this is a project that I'm working on, a paper that I'm hoping to publish. It's not my main dissertation. So any feedback I very much appreciate. So in the summer of 1917, the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto arranged to display the official Royal Persian exhibit, curated and managed by Mir-Djalali Quli Khan. In English, they call him Kuli Khan, who was the Persian consul general to the United States. The exhibit included over 150 pieces of tapestries, shawls, embroideries, cloth of gold, brocades, pottery, manuscripts, furniture, and miniature paintings. And it actually won the gold medal. But the highlight of the exhibit, as recorded in the contemporary press, was the royal tapestry of Kerman, famed for having taken 100 women working slowly, thread by thread, 10 long, weary years to complete. Elsewhere on the exhibition grounds, however, was another immense textile, which was noted in the press instead for its speed of its manufacture. This was a large khaki blanket made for the American Army, deployed to Europe only a few months before. In one article entitled Cloth of Gold to Cloth of War, this was directly contrasted with the Kerman tapestry, which we see here in a later exhibit from 1928, but that's the central one right there. As the author wrote, the space between these two bits of woolen warps is covered by human progress reckoned only in scores of centuries. In its contribution to the world's uplift, peace, and progress, the newer textile is not a whit behind its more valuable co-textile. This is what it's referring to. End quotes. The art of textile manufacture, whether by the hands of 100 Iranian women or by the latest machinery, was thus envisaged as an act of peacemaking in a world of violence and tyranny. In this presentation, I follow the travels of the official Persian exhibit during the First World War and examine how Ali Kuli Khan, seen here in front of his wares, utilized these objects to promulgate a universalistic politics rooted in what he claimed were the aesthetic principles of Persian art. Ali Gholi Khan not only organized dozens of prominent exhibits and public lectures over the course of several years, but did so as an Iranian subject, working to spread awareness of Persian art and craft several years before Arthur Upham Pope is said to have introduced the topic to American audiences. Furthermore, his approach and dissemination of Persian art was distinct. Although, like Pope, he drew upon the rhetoric of Aryanism and racial schema of 19th century and early 20th century Orientalism, he also phrased Persian aesthetic through a universalist politics rooted in his Baha'i faith, attempting to frame Persian art as a globally relevant and comprehensible form, which could bring together peace societies riven by war. In fact, from its start at the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition in San Francisco, the touring official Persian exhibit was conceived by Ali Gholi Khan as a means of countering global conflict through the appreciation of a shared humanistic aesthetic. The outbreak of the war, World War I, had led the government of Iran to cancel plans to erect a separate pavilion at the Panama Expo. And as consul, Ali Gholi Khan was thus forced to supplement the reduced number of items that arrived with objects from his personal collections. In his speeches, Ali Gholi Khan argued that Iranian participation in the expo was crucial, not only for national prestige, but in the light of the ongoing war. As he declared at the expo's opening ceremony, quote, "In spite of all that is going on in other parts of the world, here in the city, all nations meet in harmony. Here is the peace of the world." The popular success of the Panama Pacific Exposition, as you see, it also won an award, and the difficulties of returning such valuable objects to Iran inspired the transformation of the official Persian exhibit into a Trans-America tour, which would last well beyond the conclusion of the war. But Ali Gholi Khan also had a secondary motivation for taking the exhibit city to city, to advance his own ideology of aesthetic and political universalism through the interpretation of Persian art. To understand why, I think it's necessary to first examine the details of his life. So much of the biographical information of Ali Gholi Khan is from the memoirs written by his daughter, Marzia Gail, who wrote a 2-volume study of her father after his death. Born in the Iranian city of Kashan in 1879 to a wealthy family of local notables, Ali Gholi Khan received education in English and French at the Dar al-Funun in Tehran. His conversion to Baha'ism around 1895 entailed a major disruption to his life. And indeed, in subsequent years, he spent several years wandering Iran before leaving for the Ottoman Empire and afterwards the United States. As one of the few Iranian subjects in the United States at the time and a fluent speaker of English, he soon found work as the secretary to the Persian consulate in Washington, D.C., and then his career took off from there. It appears that during this time, he became considerably more involved with outreach with the American Baha'i communities and proselytizing to broader American public. In 1904, he married Florence Freed, seen here in a photo from 1913, a convert to Baha'ism from a prominent Bostonian family. Over the following decade, the couple traveled together, amassing a sizable collection of art and antiquities in the process. At the outbreak of the First World War, they were in Berlin, having stopped there after collecting Persian art from Tehran for the upcoming 1915 Expo. But they were forced to rush back to the United States, leaving most of these very valuable items behind, and thus having to reconstitute the exhibit partly from their own collections that was still in the United States. Although in Marzia's biography, Ali Gholi Khan is quoted as saying that, quote, "More than 100 museums, art galleries, and great stores have invited me to send the exhibition to their cities," end quote. In fact, in correspondences that I found with institutions in Milwaukee, Detroit, and Toledo, Ohio, show that he actively solicited these museums and requested that directors spread word about the exhibit. He also, when required, paid for the majority of the expenses, persuading museum officials to host him by arguing that it will, quote, "be practically free of charge and will mark an important event in the history of your museums," end quote. And you see here, I've tried to collect all the stops he made in just 3 years. So 1916, 1917, and 1918, but the exhibit goes on until the 1930s, but less frequently so. So this is like the red path was just one trip. And I split it by years, by color. And of course, I don't have the West, he also was in San Francisco, obviously. That's where it started. In one lecture in Milwaukee, which was reported in the media with the headline, Dr. Mirza Ali Wali Khan says Aryan race secured its inspiration in his country, he offered somewhat contradictory statement of his position. As reported, quote, speaking as one entirely free from national limitations and prejudices, I must tell you that the art of Persia is the fountainhead of the art of the Aryan race. He declared, it has a universal ring. So here we see a contradiction, right? It's both Aryan and universal. So although rhetorically there was a clear conflation of Aryan and universal in tracing both the influence of Persian art on other civilizations and other civilizations upon Persian arts throughout the centuries, he claimed no contradiction between Persian art's racial origins and its universal human value. Indeed, in contrast to Pope, for whom the influence of Arabs, Mongols, and Turks upon Iranian art was imagined essentially as contaminative, Ali Wali Khan phrased Persian art as necessarily open to influence and sharing aesthetic principles across racial boundaries. For example, in the same lecture, Ali Wali Khan traced indigenous Mexican and Navajo adobe buildings and blankets to the influence of Persian form via a long genealogy from Moorish Andalusia to Spain. Within Persia itself, he claimed that the contact with the Arabs and the Arabs and the Mongols brought a new vitality and aesthetic sensibility to Persian art. Rather than arguing that the Arab conquest had temporarily submerged the initiative and arts of Persia, as had 19th century Aryanists like Ghorbani and Renan, Ali Wali Khan proposed instead that the, quote, safe basis of universality inherent in Persian art, end quote, allowed for it to freely incorporate Islamic aesthetic principles, Mongolian geometric patterns, and the arts of calligraphy in the Arabic script. Nevertheless, the American press seemed particularly concerned that Persian art would not survive the forces of European influence. As one journalist pointedly asked Mirza Ali Wali Khan, will Persian art succumb? In response, he argued instead, it will be given new life. He stated, the art of Persia is too basic, too closely connected with the life of human race to be lost. It may be that Europeanization of Persia will give it still greater impetus, to Persian art and make its influence far more important than it is today, end quotes. In gallery tours and lectures, Mirza Ali Wali Khan also used individual pieces from his collection as material examples of this universalist ideology. These three textiles in particular, the aforementioned royal tapestry of Kerman, and two others, the Tree of Life and Adam and Eve, were central. So here is the Adam and Eve velvet tapestry, which Ali Wali Khan attributed to Kashan sometime between 11th and 15th centuries, depicting a repeated pattern of male and female figures in rose-colored thread on ivory-colored background. I'm sorry, I couldn't find the any colorizations of these photos. Hopefully soon. Underneath each figure of Adam and Eve were two smaller male figures with small cypress-like tree between them, which Ali Wali Khan claimed represented either mystic Sufis or the dual form of cruel contemplative manhood now seated under the Tree of Life. In Ali Wali Khan's interpretation, the textile told the universal story of humanity, tracing the introduction of materialism, restlessness, and struggle to human society through the eating of the apple in Eden. On the other hand, it also told the possibility of a return to a state of blissful contemplation. Similarly, Ali Wali Khan argued that the Tree of Life textile, which you see on the center, I guess left for us, produced in Isfahan, showed how children of man are leaves of the same tree, and predicted the human evolutionary progress, which would result in the understanding of one race, one religion, one God, and one humanity. In his commentary, the textile offered a kind of visual summary of his philosophy of human history and placed the creation of a universal religion as the crowning achievement of human progress. So in essence, the various objects of the exhibit became constitutive elements of a singular, explicit ideological program. The beauty of these pieces was framed not only as an aesthetic interest, but as a direct result of this ideology in practice. Although Ali Wali Khan's intense engagement with Persian art and museums in particular would begin to taper off after the war, he nevertheless remained an important figure in the popularization of Persian art throughout the United States and Canada, presaging the field of Islamic art more generally. In contrast to Arthur Upham Pope, Pope's valorization of the particular purity and genius of Persian art through a hierarchy of race and culture, Ali Quli Khan's deployment of Persian art was more multifaceted. It certainly drew upon racial hierarchies in its appeal to American audiences, but juxtaposed this with a universalist philosophy and political program which aimed to negate racial and national differences and establish global peace. In large part, the traveling exhibition was shaped by this personal initiative and took on the form of a personal mission. As journalists wrote in 1917, the official Persian exhibit was, quote, not merely a few pieces of finery held together by their beauty alone. This is the essence of Persian tradition, taken from palaces, loaned by the great and assembled by a poet, philosopher, and intellectual of Persia, Mirza Ali. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Our fourth speaker, Bahareh Rostakiani, is a curator and art historian who has recently finished her Master in Art History and Curatorial Studies from York University. She has been part of Encyclopedia Iranica Cinema project at the University of Toronto. As a curator, she recently won a prize at the Ghorbani Art Gallery. Today, she will give a presentation about contemporary Iranian art, architecture, geometry, and their intersection with the diaspora community, focusing on her case studies of Canadian Iranian art scene. Title of her presentation is Interweaving Geometry and Clay, Reimagining Islamic Tradition in the Contemporary Architecture of the Aga Khan Museum. Please join me in welcoming Bahareh with a warm round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, the title of my presentation is Interweaving Geometry and Clay, Reimagining Islamic Tradition in the Contemporary Architecture of the Aga Khan Museum. Architecture is more than just a means of constructing buildings. It's a medium through which cultural traditions, artistic expressions, and intellectual dialogues are preserved and reinterpreted. The Aga Khan Museum in Toronto is a striking example of how contemporary architecture can engage with historical traditions to create an innovative and immersive experience. Designed by the renowned architect Fahimeh Komaki, he's a Japanese architect, the museum embodies a fusion of Islamic heritage and modern design principles. Today, I examine the interplay of geometry, light, and materiality in the museum's architecture and explore how the concept of clay as a methodology deepens our understanding of its spatial and aesthetic dimensions. Geometry has historically served as the foundation of Islamic architectural and artistic traditions. Unlike Western architecture, which often focuses on figurative representations, Islamic architecture relies on mathematical precision, symmetry, and repetition to create a sense of harmony and order. These geometric patterns are not merely ornamental, but serve a symbolic function, reflecting the infinite nature of creation and the interconnectedness of all things. As we step outside of the museum that we can see here, this is the photo of the whole Aga Khan's complex all together with a garden and Ismaili Center and a museum. As we step outside the museum, we find ourselves in the meticulously designed Aga Khan Park. This space is not merely an adjunct to the museum, but an extension of its architectural philosophy. At the heart of the park lies Chahar Bagh, or a four-part garden rooted in Persian and Mughal traditions, symbolizing paradise and the harmonious balance of nature and geometry. It is designed by a Lebanese architect named Vladimir Jurovich, which is in the middle of the photo. And we can see here as well. In a rapidly urbanizing city like Toronto, where architectural spaces often prioritize functionality over contemplation, the Aga Khan Museum and its surrounding landscape offer a moment of pause. The interplay of water, greenery, and geometric design encourages visitors to slow down, reflect, and engage with the built environment in a more meaningful way. Light, of course, plays a critical role in this geometric framework, transforming surfaces and spaces through shifting patterns and reflections. Historical examples such as Sheikh Lutfullah Mosque in Isfahan illustrate how the geometry worked together to create depth that engaged the viewer in a dynamic visual experience. That we can see here. On my right, actually, we have a museum, and on the left, we have Sheikh Lutfullah's mosque, which can be compared together. Beyond its architectural and aesthetic dimensions, the Elahé Museum serves a broader cultural and philosophical purpose. His Highness, the Aga Khan IV, envisioned the museum as a center for education and dialogue, stating that my hope is that the museum will also be a center of education and of learning, and that it will act as a catalyst for mutual understanding and tolerance, which I think that he has been successful so far. This vision is embedded in the building's design. The central courtyard, inspired by traditional Islamic gardens, served as a contemplative space, a setting where visitors can reflect on the relationship between architecture, nature, and historical continuity. The museum's skylights and reflective pools, that we can see the reflectiveness here. Harness light, a crucial element in Islamic architectural traditions, evoking a sense of weightlessness and transcendence. By merging Islamic aesthetics with minimalist modernism, the museum challenges the notion that Islamic architecture is a relic of the past and cannot be continued. Instead, it demonstrates that tradition is an evolving force capable of being reinterpreted in contemporary contexts while maintaining its fundamental essence. In this way, the museum acts as a bridge, not only between East and West, but also between past and present and hopefully future. Fahimeh reinterprets traditional geometric principle in a contemporary context, integrating minimalist forms, which we can see in his use of white Brazilian granite and an intricate interplay of light and shadow. The museum's design revolves around a central courtyard, a motif deeply embedded in Islamic architectural traditions. This courtyard acts as the heart of the structure, fostering interaction and contemplation, while evoking historical significance of open-air gathering spaces in Islamic culture. The Aga Khan complex consists of 3 spaces that we can see in the very first photo. On the right is the Smiley Center, that one, which is designed by Charles Correa. And in the middle, we have the Aga Khan Park, which is designed by a Lebanese architect, Vladimir Djorbich. And on the left, we have the museum itself, which is designed by Fahimeh. The museum's facade, with its diamond-shaped recess, serves as an exemplar of dynamic geometry in architecture. Throughout the day, the sunlight shifts, the facade appears to transform, evoking the fluidity and dynamism of traditional Islamic geometrical patterns. This architectural approach creates an evolving dialogue between the built environment and natural elements, reinforcing the museum's role as a space for cultural engagement. Now, what does play have to do with all of these things? When we talk about play, we remember of Jean Piaget, the developmental psychologist, who famously said that play is the answer to how anything new comes about. The concept of play is crucial in architectural discourse, as it allows for a reimagining of space, form, and function. In my research, I engaged with the Aga Khan Museum's architecture through 3 distinct methodologies. I used these 3 medium as my platform in order to play and to understand the museum itself. The first one was drawing. This process enabled a deeper engagement with the building's geometry, as tracing its angles and curves revealed the underlying spatial logic. And the second medium I used was photography. By capturing ephemeral moments such as the shifting of light and visitors' interactions with the space, I was able to analyze the museum's architectural dynamism. And the third one was filmmaking. Moving beyond static representations, film allowed for a more immersive exploration of the museum as a living, breathing entity that evolves with time. Actually, this was my second experience with short filmmaking. I was quite challenging as I had to consider the building as a character with whom I was in dialogue. So that was quite challenging for me. These methodologies highlight the museum's capacity to invite active participation rather than passive observation. It is not merely a static structure, but an experiential space that continually interacts with its visions and surroundings. The Aga Khan Museum, with its fusion of geometric rigor and contemporary minimalism, reaffirms that architecture is not merely a reflection of cultural history. It's an active participant in shaping cultural narratives. The building's facade features a grid of large, white square tiles punctuated by diamond space structures that create a striking interplay of light and shadow. These geometric elements evoke both tradition and innovation, illustrating the fluidity of Islamic architectural principles in a modern context. Beyond aesthetics, the museum's architecture fosters a dialogue between past and present, nature and structure, contemplation and engagement. The juxtaposition of sharp geometric forms with the organic softness of trees and gardens create a visual and philosophical harmony, emphasizing the ongoing conversation between tradition and modernity that we can see here. Through my engagement with the museum via drawing, photography, and filmmaking, I discovered that its design is not static, but an evolving narrative shaped by time, light, and human interaction. At the end, the Aga Khan Museum is more than a repository of Islamic art. It's a living, breathing space that invites continuous exploration and reinterpretation. It stands as a testament to the power of architecture in bridging histories, cultures, and ideas, ensuring that tradition remains a dynamic and integral part of contemporary life, hopefully. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahareh, for your inspiring presentation. I'm so surprised that we're finally having our last speaker. Today's last speaker, Negar Sagharichi, is from Department of Near and Middle Eastern Civilizations at University of Toronto, where she's working on her master's. With 15 years of experience in museums and Islamic art, she has published her research on intercultural experience for immigrants, and currently she's working on a project about national museums of immigrants. Negar has won multiple scholarships, most recently from Musavvir Memorial Foundation and Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies. Today, her presentation is on Malek National Museum and Library in Tehran with the title Malek National Museum and Library, on endowment towards community growth and intercultural exchange. Please join me in welcoming Negar.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Leila, for organizing this symposium. And thank you, Elahé Mir-Djalali, for this chance. Today we heard about artists, curators. Now I want to talk about the patron. Imagine a world of Islamic art and art without a patron, without patrons. Imagine that in Islamic world, we didn't have people like Gohar, like Sultan Sulaiman, who supported the artists. Imagine this world without WAF, if they didn't WAF in their collections, what did we have? Today, I want to talk about a person who endowed all his assets, his properties, his collections to the people of Iran with two main goals. And he didn't live very long time ago. He just died like 50 years ago. So let's see who he was and what did he do. Hossein Malek, or as we know him, Haj Hossein Agha Malek, the merchant. And let me see if they can move. Yeah. Okay. A merchant and a patron. Muhammad Hossein Malek is the oldest son of Muhammad Kazem Malek al-Tujjar and grandson of Agha Mehdi Malek al-Tujjar, or Agha Mehdi Malek al-Tujjar Mamalik Mahruse. So his grandfather, Haj Agha Mehdi, was a merchant in the Grand Bazaar of Tabriz. And he served as Fatemeh Soudavar Farmayan mentioned in her article. He was served Abbas Mirza honorably as treasurer during the Russo-Iran wars. Later was named as Malek al-Tujjar Mamalik Mahruse, or king of merchants of the protected territories. So on the left, you can see the decree of Muhammad Shah Qajar granting the title of Malek al-Tujjar to Haj Agha Mehdi. Later, after, there is something interesting about him. He was the man who gave money to Nasruddin Shah, or Crown Prince Nasruddin Mirza, to come to Tehran for his coronation. So he's an important person. After his death, the title of Malek al-Tujjar gave to his older son, Muhammad Kazem, Muhammad Hussein's father. So, Haj Hossein Agha Malek, Haj Hossein Agha Malek was born in 31 May 1871. He was, because his father owned a vast acres of lands in Khorasan, northeast of Iran, he moved from Tehran to Mashhad in 1905 to supervise his father's lands. Later, in 1906, he married Zahra Khanum Nawab Qudsiyeh in Mashhad. Nawab Qudsiyeh Khanum was the daughter of the person who was in charge of Goharshad Mosque. So also, this person was important. Later, they shared three daughters, Izzat Malek, Malek Zada, and Siddiqah together. But Nawab Qudsiyeh Khan died early, and later, many years later, Haj Hossein Agha married his second wife, Zarin Khanum, and they shared two daughters, Florette and Rosette. So, as I said, Haj Hossein Agha moved to Mashhad, married his first wife, and then in 1918, when his father died, he moved from Mashhad to Tehran. In 1937, his first endowment happened, and in 1961, his last endowment happened, and he died at 26th of July, 1972. So, upper side on your left, you can see his house in Mashhad. Here is his house in the middle of Grand Bazaar of Tehran. And the other side is Bagh Melli, which is now the location of the Malek National Library and Museum. This is Haj Hossein Agha Malek in old age, and here is his funeral ceremony in Mashhad. Okay, so now let's see what did he do. Malek National Library and Museum. So based on his interview with Etalat newspaper in 1899, when I went to Mashhad with my late father to see the properties of Khorasan, in our return in Neyshabur, Nayar Dora, the ruler of the city,
gave us, who numbered like 400 people, a grand welcome and a 50-day reception. In Neyshabur, I found a copy of the Divan of Ibn Yamin Faryumadi, and in these 15 days, I wrote a copy of for myself of this book. So this was the first glimpse for his collection. After that, the idea of establishing a large library came to my mind. 6 years later, I was appointed by my father to Khorasan. There, I purchased the library of Sheikh Abdul Hussein, son of Sheikh Abdul Rahim Burjadi. Later, I purchased the books of Mirza Aristotle, the secretary of the Russian consulate, and created my own library with these manuscripts. After that, wherever I heard that there was a manuscript, I went after it. In this way, I gained a reputation so that everyone came to me to sell manuscripts. I would buy whatever manuscripts were available. So, from Neyshabur to Meydan Wahj. As I said, in 1980, Library and Museum of Haj Hossein Agha moved from Mashhad to Tehran. The library, as he said in the same interview, the library was in my house in Mashhad till my father died. I dedicated this house where I was born in Tehran to the library. I haven't returned the books to the library until I've read them. Later in 1937, he endowed the Malek National Library and Museum. Endowment of the entire patronal house, including all the books and objects in the library for the use of all the population of Iran as a branch of the Holy Library of Imam Reza. This is based on the deed of endowment number 8194, notarized at the 28th of October, 1937. In 1944, he endowed a piece of land in Bagh Melli for the construction of library and museum. In deed of endowment number 6668, notarized at 12th of July 1944, he mentioned that endowment of the entire piece of a land in Bagh Melli for the construction of the library and museum only. This land was exchanged with another one in northern part of Saadabad near Darband Square with Reza Shah, and he immediately endowed the land. So he mentioned some values, mission, and vision for himself. As a value, he mentioned that, first I read the Persian, then English. و در این خدمت ناچیز به شهادت قادر متعال و آن امام همام علیه السلام جز خدمت به خلق و ایفای وظیفه و سعادت افراد مملکت نظری نداشته و ندارم. In this insignificant service, by testimony of God and Imam Reza, I have had no other purpose than to serve the people and fulfill the duty of making people of the country happy. For the mission, he mentioned all these are based on the deed of endowment number 8194, last page of this endowment. For his mission, he mentioned that و چون طریق خدمت را در ترقی معارف و حفظ صحه خلق یافتم، بیمارستان چناران، کتابخانه و موزه ملک را وقف کردم تا کافه و عامه افراد سکنه ایران بدون رعایت ملیت حق استفاده داشته و هر یک از افراد در خور استعداد خود اندالحاجه. And because I found a way to serve the people in the development of education and preservation of public health, I dedicated the National Malek Library and Museum and the General Hospital, so the public and the residents of Iran, regardless of nationality, have the right to use it, and each person can use it according to their abilities and needs. As a vision, he mentioned that من اگر از طرف پدر مأمور رسیدگی به املاک خراسان نمی شدم، موزه‌ای برپا می کردم که با موزه ملی بریتانیا برابری کند. If I hadn't been made the trustee of Khorasan estate by my father, I would have established a museum that would be on par with the British Museum. I just wanted to note something that he said this sentence intentionally because he knew that he has the money, he has the wish to establish such a museum and library, and also he knew that the capacity of the art and culture of Iran let him do that. So later he mentioned that
انگیزه من از تأسیس موزه سکه و فرش و قلمدان و نقاشی که هنوز در دست تکمیل است این بود که بعضی از مراجعین کتابخانه من محققین خارجی هستند. آنها سوال می‌کردند که سکه‌های قدیم ایران و یا خطوط تاریخی و قلمدان‌ها را که همگی نشانه تمدن کهن ماست کجا می‌توانند تماشا کنند و من برای سهولت کار آنها و نیز استفاده ملت ایران دست به ایجاد این موزه زدم. My motivation for establishing the Museum of Coins, Carpets, Pen Cases, Paintings, etc., which is still being completed, was that some of the patrons of my library are foreign researchers. They asked where they could view ancient Iranian coins, historical inscriptions, and pen cases, all of which are signs of our ancient civilization. I set out to create this museum to facilitate their work and to benefit of Iranian people. So I have to move fast. So fulfilling mission value towards community growth. So you have to count this minutes that it's not working.
Susan?
No. No? Okay, so to support his library and museums, in 1945 he did actually do another endowment, number 4743, and he mentioned that 1/3 of this, the profit from the income of plots of agricultural lands in Fahimeh should be dedicated to the library and museum. Also in 1951, in another endowment, he mentioned that part of the profit from the income of 20 plots of agricultural land in Khorasan and 687 shops in Grand Bazaar of Tehran should be dedicated to the library and museum. In 1956, in another endowment, he mentioned that part of the profit from the income of 9 farms and 6 qanats in Khorasan should be and another shops in Grand Bazaar of Tehran should be dedicated to the library and museums. So when I say that he's a patron and he supported many scholars like Iraj Afshar, Jala Amuzgar, Abdullah Anvar, Mansour Ettehadieh, Nasser Takmil Humayun, in their memories mentioned that they enjoyed his welcoming character and his collection of manuscripts and his collection of artworks. Mansour Ettehadieh mentioned that I was a student in London. I came to Tehran and I visited his library, and he ordered that I can have access to all the manuscripts that I want. And every single day, he asked all the people who were in the library and museum, he invited all the people in the library and museum for lunch. And he exchanges information during this lunchtime. On the right side, you can see that he also supporting students who study abroad of Iran. This is one of the letters from a student in Belgium, another one in Frankfurt, and also he supported the students, non-Iranian students, like there is another letter, he supported an Indian student. So if you can remember, I read something about that this museum and library belongs to all people of Iran. So in most cases, people with special needs, maltreated children, or other people are excluded from the museum activities. But because of his endowment, Malek National Library and Museum could create some exhibitions, workshops for this group of children and people with Alzheimer, people with autism, people with visual impaired, and also maltreated children. To do that, they started a progress of digitizing all the artworks, manuscripts. They established a very, very well organized workshops of preservation and conservation, and also new walls, as you can see in the picture. And also he gave access to all the people through their website. So you can have access to all the artworks, all the manuscripts through the website. Also, the process of renovation of all the library halls and also the museum exhibitions began. So on the Upper side, you can see the exhibition of sciences in Islamic around Iran, Kamal's collection of paintings, the collection of stamps, here, the exhibition of 1,000 stories, the art and life, and down here you can see the collection donated by his daughter, his oldest daughter, Lady Azat Malek. Sorry. Also, you can see the temporary exhibitions that can reflect the Iranian art and culture, the exhibition of sitting, the exhibition of marriage or arnikah, and then the exhibition of Loharas Memari, which is a seasonal masterpiece. And for the intercultural communication, Malek National Library and Museum designed a 3-year program for the second generation of immigrants in Iran. You can see the pictures of this series of workshops. And on the left up, you can see the exhibition of, yes. And also, they had a collaboration with other museums around the world in this situation that Iran has the Malek National Museum act as like a diplomat, a cultural diplomat for the country. So this is because of his endowments that now we can enjoy a vast amount of manuscripts, digital manuscripts. And also after him, lots of other people motivated to donate their collections, like Nasrin Dastebeheshti, his daughter Malek, his grandson Abul Ala, his granddaughter Fahimeh, and many more people. So now they have, people can have access to hidden gems. Oh yeah, really. And so thank you so much, Fahimeh Sudawar Farmayan, for all your donations and all your family's donations to Malek National Library and Museum. Now people can enjoy these collections and all your support, as I know that, as I'm one of those people who enjoyed your support. And I know that many more scholars can enjoy your support as well.
Well, I also want to take the opportunity to thank Fahimeh Sudawar to giving us the honor of participating in this gathering. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, first of all, let me thank you all for your original, thought-provoking, really good scholarship presentation. It's awesome. And I have a number of questions, but let me start with the very first one that I've been formulating, Bahareh. I was really impressed with your study of Aga Khan Museum. I'm wondering whether you have had the opportunity of looking at original proposals that were presented by architects. I'm sure that there must have been a competition. There must have been a number of different proposals. And if you look at those documents and see why they chose this particular design, and then be able to go back and forth and compare the design that was adopted and accepted and funded against the ones that were not built. That will give both historical depth, and then it will also give your analysis much more historicity and linking to the people who were actively involved in making the decision that we want this, we don't want that. This is not Islamic art. If it is, it's too traditional. We don't want it. Yeah.
Then I have just seen some of the other architects of the Khan's part who just proposed their architectural design that they were not accepted. They were too connected with the very traditional concept of architecture of Islamic ideas, which was not really the thing that himself was interested in. So because of that, he went for the concept rather than copying the traditional concept. So I think that among the other works that I saw and Jurwich's work, I can say that he was more to the contemporary period, and he was just more to the concept of architectural design of Islamic works, rather than copying, repeating the intricate design of them. So I think so that was what he's looking for, and he got it. So I don't know about the other things, but I think that it can be a really great essay itself to just go for that.
It could be a great PhD dissertation if you go back to all the proposals and exploring it. Yeah.
They established at the same year, like within 10 days. Actually, but the difference is that National Museum of Iran didn't open to the public until a few years later. Although that those established at the same year, but Mr. Malek opened his house to the public immediately, but the National Museum of Iran opened to the public after the marriage of Muhammad Pahlavi, the crown prince of that time, with his first wife, Princess Futuwwa of Egypt. It was like a competition between, I can't say the competition, but the idea of being national is something that like was the hegemonic discourse at that time. So both enjoyed this chance. But I cannot say that they compete with each other because for one, the ancient Iran was important. For the other one, the Islamic. So the collection of Mr. Malek is mainly focused on the Islamic art. The collection of ancient, because at that time it was a national museum of ancient museum of Iran. And it has a floor, for the Islamic art, but it mainly focused on the ancient artwork. So
Before we move on, there's a question from the floor of Nassim Ahmadian. Okay.
You're the floor.
Oh, yeah.
So there is a question from Nassim Ahmadian. In your research, from Fahimeh, in your research, have you seen the Futuwwa culture and ethics popularized more broadly in general lifestyle and aesthetic education? Another part of the question, can we assume that this was part of performing arts cultivation as in poetry and visual art? And the third part, I understand, is the comment. I understand this might not have been your focus, but did you come across historical examples? Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, I didn't understand the first question.
The first one, have you seen the Futuwwa culture and ethics popularized more broadly in general lifestyle and aesthetic education?
In education?
Education and general lifestyle. General lifestyle, like in daily life and lifestyle.
Yeah, through the Islamic, through the history from pre-Islamic to the even through the Qajar period, 18th and 19th century, Futuwwa took many forms and absorbed by different social groups, being military groups and craft communities. Sometimes it was absorbed by even the Sufis. And so it was really prevalent, and it was not part of formal education in Islamic land as much as I know, but probably influential, for example, in the education of the officers in military, or education of the crafts people and crafts practitioners. Yeah, but not in the formal system of education. And also later on, during the very late Safavid and Qajar period, we see the incarnation of kind of Futuwwa into the tradition of Zulkhane, which in that context, it is accompanied by music, by dance, by performances, and also many visual elements that accompany the tradition and is incorporated with it. So yes.
Thank you so much. Yes, I mean, for the photographs, they're from Albright Museum in his personal collection, but only two. So I've gotten my hands on his personal collection, and so I've contacted the Albright Museum. They said they're gonna get me the photographs, and I'm hoping they're all hand colored. I don't know if they were just select few, so I'm hoping I can find the original hand colored photographs. But then, yeah, I mean that's another question, like how do we access the textures of these textiles through these. So, so yeah, that's yeah. In terms of the first question, did he address it? I think for Ali Kuli Khan, from my interpretation, this idea of the Aryan race is coming out because of his audience and the people that he's speaking to, in the sense that if he frames it, this idea of an Aryan race, it's sort of creating this idea that the Iranian Persian art has a place of interest. And so the American audiences, the white audience, can then feel like this is prestigious work. So I think that is coming out because of who he's speaking to. But in his own, I found some of his missionary work. He actually also does missionary on the side during his trip. In those sort of lectures, he doesn't much on so it seems like it's catering to the audience, which why there's a contradiction. It's a strange one for sure. He still like says it's Aryan, but also the Navajo Mexican included in this same with similar art stuff. So he doesn't seem committed.
Actually, what is interesting is that his conception of Iranian Aryan is very similar to what you may see in Persian language journals like Kaveh, Farangistan, Iran Shahr. So his hegemonic idea of Aryanism as cosmopolitan and global, and Semitism that Iranians mainly identify with Arabs and with Islam is local. This other one is global. But the question that I had was that, have you been able, since you have looked through his own paper, to what extent was he inspired by the success of the Persian Pavilion during the Chicago World Exhibition of 1893? I have no doubt that he must have been fully aware of it and was riding on the wave that was created with kind of really big press that Persian Pavilion got during that period.
Yes, I mean, I think I agree. He's aware of it. Even I think this is why he's insisting on the importance of continuing because they wanted to cancel. From the Iranian government side, they wanted to cancel the exhibition because of the war and the items were stuck. But he was really insisting that it's extremely important that they have at least their textiles and art without a pavilion. So they didn't get to manufacture the large pavilion at 2018, but they do again later. So this was 1 year where they just had the objects. The reason I think he insisted on it was that and again, in Toronto, it became another gold-winning exhibition. And again, there was no pavilion. It was in a shared building. So I don't know. I think it's interesting he's not insisting on it.
Well, that was a much larger world exhibition, which the financing of it.
And it seems, this idea. seems like there's so many people involved.
My sincere apologies, everyone, but we cannot hear anybody from the audience.
So,
there is this movement to identify artists, individual artists.
Yeah.
When does that start? Does that start with like Timurid art? Does that start in the Timurid period with people like Behzad or?
I would say it started with the second half, let's say from the middle of the 16th century. And we have, I mean, the same question could apply to Behzad. What does it mean for painting to be seen Behzad? Because we have artists in the 17th century producing work and designing Behzad. Was not made by Behzad. Maybe the drawing was made by Behzad and which is copied, but they acknowledge Behzad's authorship by reproducing it. So this whole question of who makes it and what factors influences the authorship is
It's a very large question. Well, sometimes you have these descriptions that something was behooved, and it won't be fall of something. So I think, you know,
especially when it comes to Musavvir, because I want to say he's the white whale of the field, at least in the 17th century. Because we have so many paintings cited by him, and because he was a Rezab's student, we think it's pretty easy. But it isn't, because when we look, we have different quality, different signatures, shapes. So what do we do with that? We get that huge material.
yeah. So you mentioned
Bassi's son, signed this famous and favorite miniatures designed by Musavvir of Bassi. Would they have worked together? They would be contemporaries, wouldn't they?
Yeah, you wouldn't totally, but there's many things. We know that Reza Bassi's son was, to some extent, related to the court, to the Kitab Khaneh. We don't know if it's the same, if it same applies for Muhin. We have, for instance, the frescoes in the Cheikh Sultan Palace. They're consistent with Reza Bassi's followers, students, possibly Muhin, possibly Shafi and others, because we don't have evidence. And these frescoes are not signed. Yes, it is. It's a serious topic, right?
I think we have a couple of more minutes.
Invitation and thank you for all of your talks illuminating. My question also is for Quentin. I wanted to know why, it might be a basic question, a stupid question, but nonetheless, why would they sign, as you said, many of them didn't sign the paintings, and it wasn't tradition to sign the paintings. And some of these paintings traveled. Not the painting itself, but the model itself. So, for example, the paintings that I'm interested in, the paintings of Iblis, you see the exact replication in Iran, another 100 years or 50 years after, in Ottoman court, another one in Shiraz back again. So if somebody would sign something, would that count as like a copyright thing that nobody else can kind of make a copy out of this kind of a style, or was it something that you just want to put their signature on it as it was belonging to me, perhaps?
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you. Possibly, is the signature a sign of possession, that the drawing was made by this person and belongs to him, or is it just a sign of someone who reproduces it? I don't have the answer yet, so I cannot answer you, but it's a very good question.
But what is here really important is this notion of authorship, and that this is my work and you put your signature on it. And this notion must have been an emerging idea. And in literature, there is a lot of discussion of when did the notion of authorship and signed pieces, signed artwork emerge? How does this particular work relate to this larger debate of
I mean, it has an
artistic,
of course, and from the 16th century, we have art treatises, right?
Yeah.
With the preface to the album of Bahareh, right? And very famous texts, right, such as this one, who, in my opinion, do participate in the change when it comes to authorship and perception artists have of themselves. Right?
Oh yeah, sorry.
So you mentioned that you observed like the interaction between the visitors and the Negar. Bahar, sorry, I'm so sorry. Sorry. Yeah. So yeah, what was this interaction and like what did you observe? What is the dynamism of this relationship of visitors to the architecture of Aga Khan Museum?
There were different groups of people who were just attending the museum at different times. So, the Islamic art itself, but it just like the atmosphere of the museum itself. Okay, so why shouldn't we go there as I don't know as a picnic? So the Al-Ham's park is so attractive that visitors got interested and they came they just attend the museum from different group of people, different range of people and with different backgrounds. So, yeah. No, I haven't noticed really arguments, but they were just happening in the museum. So I think of the old art. So this is something that I should do. Thank you very much for this.
Oh, cables, right?
Yeah.
It's also rather.
It is.
So now the time's around 6. We all have to go for our dinner. There's some bread we can have for that. Thank you all for being here. And now I'm gonna pass my mic to Leila to wrap up our today's.
I just want to thank you so much for attending and for that by student in the future program that we have. And thank you for the.
Thank you, Linda.
No, it's okay. Yeah, it was all great. We have like refreshment. If you want to, help yourself, you just enjoy it.
And I must say that I'm also really impressed with the Iranian Studies Student Forum and the high quality panels, discussions that you guys organizing, and amazing. Keep up the good work.
Do you want to say something to the audience? Do you want to say something?
And just thanking everyone for attending. We have a number of really distinguished colleagues online. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
And have a nice evening.
Thank you.